Very good morning to you all, and let me extend to you all an extremely warm welcome to the launch of the Global Innovation Index 2012. The Global Innovation Index 2012 is a joint production of INSEAD, represented here by Mr. Soumitra Dutta, who has just disappeared from sight but will be coming up the index in one moment. It's a co-production of INSEAD and WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, together with a number of knowledge partners, notably Alcatel-Lucent, Booz and Company, and the Confederation of Indian Industry. And an extremely important input has been provided by our advisory board, of whom a number of the distinguished members are present this morning, most notably immediately on my right, a gentleman well known to all of you, Mr. Hamadoun Toure, the Secretary General of the International Telecommunication Union. So a very warm welcome to you. It will not have escaped your attention that over recent months a great deal of economic policy discussion has been focused on the economic crisis, and in particular on the appropriate policy mix that we need in order to emerge from the global economic crisis that has affected us all. And in that policy mix, appropriate policy mix, there is of course a balance that needs to be struck between, on the one hand, austerity measures which are directed at sustainable public finances, but on the other hand, most importantly, of course, policies to encourage economic growth and employment. And we believe that innovation is an essential element of the policy mix to encourage economic growth and employment. And we do believe that it is also extremely important to resist downward pressures on investment in innovation which are being exerted in the current economic context. And it's in this context of a policy discussion on the appropriate mix of economic policies that we are very pleased to launch the Global Innovation Index. The Global Innovation Index contains, as you know, a number of metrics which will be detailed and outlined by Soumitra Dutta in one moment, a number of metrics which are designed to put innovation under a process of continual evaluation, innovation systems under a process of continual evaluation, and to provide a tool for refining innovation policies. The theme of this year's Global Innovation Index is creating stronger innovation linkages for global growth. And we firmly believe that those linkages are an extremely important element of an innovation ecosystem. Collaboration, the flow of ideas between different innovation actors, and access to knowledge are all increasingly important ingredients in innovation. What we would say, I think, is that the index is in many respects a journey to enable us to understand better innovation, the phenomenon of innovation in society. And in this respect, we would say that our experiences and lessons in designing effective policies that foster innovation linkages are still somewhat rare and somewhat scarce and somewhat embryonic. And likewise, measuring the existence and the impact of innovation linkages is an extremely difficult task. And thus the importance of the commencement of trying to understand that task this year. Let me say one final word before thanking our partners. One final word about WIPO's involvement in the Global Innovation Index. Why is WIPO involved? Because, of course, the reason why we have intellectual property is to encourage innovation. Intellectual property, we believe, is an indispensable element in a healthy innovation ecosystem and an indispensable policy tool for encouraging innovation. I would like to now extend thanks once again to our knowledge partners, Alcatel-Lucent, Booz and Company, and the Confederation of Indian Industry, and also to acknowledge here the presence of a number of distinguished members of our advisory board. I have mentioned Mr. Hamadoun Toure. Let me mention also Mr. Sibisi, the Chief Executive Officer of the CSIR in South Africa. We have representatives from CERN present with us this morning, from KACST, from ISOC, the Internet Society, and from UNESCO, and we're delighted to welcome them all. I'm now going to hand the floor to Mr. Hamadoun Toure, the Secretary General of the International Telecommunication Union.
Thank you, Francis, and good morning to you all. Everybody now knows that we're not simply just neighbors. Innovation is really one thing that links ITU and WIPO. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to be here with you this morning for the launch of the Global Innovation Index 2012. And I would like to also thank all the knowledge partners and thank INSEAD for asking me to join as a member. I'm very proud to be part of this initiative, which has come about in part because of the Broadband Commission for Digital Development, which was set up by UNESCO and ITU 2 years ago. I have the honor to be co-chair of the co-vice chair, of the Broadband Commission. Francis Gurry and Bruno Lanvin, the executive director of INSEAD eLabs, both serve as broadband commissioners, so perhaps it is inevitable that we should be all here together today. I think we all recognize the vital importance of innovation, and I'm delighted to see the publication today of the Global Innovation Index 2012, which is a significant report reflecting an enormous amount of work and which will prove an invaluable tool as we move forward. Ladies and gentlemen, in the 21st century, of course, innovation and information and communication technologies, ICTs, are inseparable. Indeed, we have seen how ICTs have really powered innovation forward, from mobile banking to social networking, from online shopping to collaborative working, from e-health or m-health to new media, and from distance learning to e-government. Perhaps most importantly, however, ICTs have proved to be the most extraordinary enabler of innovation, because with ICTs, almost anyone can build new services and applications, as we have seen from the millions and millions of apps which have sprung up in recent years across multiple platforms. ICTs and broadbands spur innovation in three very important ways. First, they enable access to a global platform of knowledge that in turn accelerates and enables further innovation and inventions. Second, they exponentially increase the ability of people to create, exchange and debate ideas and share knowledge, the mental building blocks of innovation and invention. And third, they produce new business paradigms that can be transported successfully into other sectors. This is all good news. But today, however, we should not forget that while almost everyone has access to mobile telephony, we have 6 billion people already connected to mobile telephony, 2/3 of the world's people are still not connected online. This is something we must change. And change quickly. And this is why we set up the Broadband Commission to advocate for increased broadband rollout globally. This is not just as a means of helping accelerate progress toward meeting the Millennium Development Goals, but also as a spur to further innovation, essentially in the developing world. So let me encourage you all to support our work on the Broadband Commission and to advocate for increased access to broadband. Let's bring equitable, affordable access to all the world's people. By doing so, we will really be using the wealth of innovation that is out there. Because one critical ingredient is driving innovation is human brain. And this is one natural resource that is equally distributed everywhere around the world. No country, nation, race, or culture has more or less of it. But we need to train them and in the right direction. And governments need to put the right legal and regulatory framework that will be conducive to driving that. So let's work together in making sure that we get all the 7 billion people of this planet to come together and bring their innovative skills and share them. Together we'll make the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hamadoun. It's now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Anjan Das, who is the Executive Director for Technology of the Confederation of Indian Industry, one of the knowledge partners.
Thank you, Francis. On behalf of Confederation of Indian Industry, we are the oldest partner of this initiative, of this young initiative, I should say, for coming out for this 4th Global Innovation Index. I congratulate Professor Soumitra Dutta for this initiative. I thank Francis for accepting to partner this initiative and making it such an incredible exercise. My sincere thanks to Alcatel-Lucent and Booz and Company for supporting this initiative. In last 4 years, actually, we have seen this exercise has grown strength to strength, in fact. The whole methodology, the model is changing every day. So we see a lot of evolution in place, and I'm sure this process of evolution will continue. Many countries actually evolving its innovation ecosystem in a much different way to challenge their own system, to actually face their own priorities and challenges. I'm not very sure whether at some point in time, whether a single evaluation criteria, a single scale can map all the countries. I think there may be many derivatives can come out of this innovation index exercise to map the countries to match their own priorities and challenges. I'm sure that will come in the future. The whole world is innovating to access the markets like India with the products and processes and solutions which can access the major market, the people in that particular country. And we are seeing increasingly lot of global partnerships are happening with the local industry in the countries and the global technology providers. I think it's a new trend which is happening, and we can see a much more emphasis is being given to the output and solution-driven innovation ecosystem than the input-driven innovation ecosystem. I'm sure that a good amount of balance is taking place between these two, output-driven and the input-driven ecosystems. One of the key factors, of course, we cannot deny that innovation ecosystem can vary from country to country, but the private sector investments and the government stimulants to attract private sector's investments into innovation is almost a common key factor in all the countries. And we are seeing a lot of examples of private sector investments and involvement in this innovation, and a lot of policy imperatives which are actually given to invest and to attract private sector investments. I can say a few examples for in Indian context. Confederation of Indian Industry and Government of India a few initiatives as a trigger to this innovation ecosystem, which possibly go a long way. CII and Government of India have recently launched a joint fellowship program to sponsor the PhD scholars to do research on industry's research assignments. And it's an excellent platform where Government of India is putting a scholarship and Indian companies topping it up, that scholarship, for a PhD scholar to do research on industry's assignment. Second, very recently, CII and Government of India have jointly established a not-for-profit company called Global Innovation and Technology Alliance to support industry for global alliances in technology and innovation. It's an excellent PPP model outside the government for the interest of the industry. So there will be many such examples, I'm sure, that from many countries it will come, and such triggers will emulate others to follow. Coming back to the index, I think we'll be seeing a transition towards helping countries to develop and amend their science and technology policy, innovation policy, MSME policy, entrepreneurship policy. The key elements of this innovation index will emerge in the future. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anjan. It's now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Per-Ola Karlsson, who is a senior partner and the managing director for Europe, as well as leader of global practices of Booz and Company. Mr. Karlsson.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here today with you as the Global Innovation Index report is being presented. Innovation has always been a very important component for all our clients to be successful, and it was a great honor when we were asked to be part of this effort, and it's been very rewarding for us as well. So thanks for having us here. The Global Innovation Index report confirms that economies with strong innovation cultures have managed to link people, capital, and research to introduce novelty and to create economic wealth. Many successful companies like Switzerland and the Netherlands with high innovation performance are ones that have invested heavily into innovation inputs such as academic institutions, talent, sophisticated markets and businesses. And all these elements are important, of course, for driving innovation. But what's even more important, perhaps, is that these countries have also been able to figure out how to transform ideas into outputs, knowledge, technology, goods, and services. And the transformation that's taking place in these countries is really the result of how they've been able to create effective linkages across lots of different stakeholders that foster an environment that transform ideas into successful outcomes. What's clear is that success in innovation is not only about quantitative inputs. It's not only about the amount of researchers, the amount of funds going into R&D, the amount of patents being filed and so forth. Companies and countries that are successful at innovation also focus on some of the qualitative aspects around innovation. They think a lot about how to transform strategies into the capabilities required to be successful. They focus a lot around how to nurture an environment that supports innovation. The tighter the connections between strategy, culture, and innovation, the greater the leverage companies and countries will have in bringing innovation inputs into the marketplace with successful products and services. Booz and Company has always been interested in innovation, and for that purpose, we've, over many years, been studying the top 1,000 spenders in innovation. So the companies spending most money on R&D, essentially. One of the outcomes from this work is that the amount of money being plowed into R&D is a bad predictor for how successful these companies are in innovation. Other aspects are much more important. It's how these companies think about their focused innovation strategy. It's how they think about establishing a capabilities system for executing against their strategies. Perhaps most noteworthy, these companies have really figured out how to link the different elements in a corporation to drive success. And so here too, the linkages between the various stakeholders in a company are essential for driving innovation success. As we worked around innovation and the importance of coherence in companies, we recognize that coherence is also something which is equally important for countries. Coherence at a country level, linking innovation strategies to capabilities, really requires the various stakeholders in these companies to come together into an effective ecosystem. In developed countries, the challenge is to make sure to foster and strengthen these linkages. In developing countries, it's really important to figure out what is a national model that establishes these coherent linkages in their respective systems. Now, this involves connecting the various stakeholders. It involves thinking through a coherent set of policies, how to steward investments, among other things. We've seen as well that in many places, establishing an innovation promotion entity can be very helpful. For having a body that drives these connections, convenes the relevant stakeholders, it makes sure that policies are coordinated and driving the national agenda. At Booz, we believe that coherence around key capabilities drives essential advantage, both at a country and at a corporate level. We also believe that both the public and private sectors have an important role to play in increasing global wealth by developing coherent strategies and linkages for innovation at both the company and at the country level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Karlsson. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to hand over the floor to Mr. Bruno Lanvin. Mr. Bruno Lanvin is someone who is well known to many of you. He is currently the director of the eLab at INSEAD. You come. At INSEAD, but in former incarnations has worked with the World Bank, with UNCTAD, amongst other things. Bruno, I would like to invite you and our distinguished panel that is going to now make presentations. Soumitra first. Okay, come. You can not the power, yeah? Okay. Come. Do you want to introduce Soumitra? You're not going to say. All right. No.
It is my pleasure and honor to introduce Professor Soumitra Dutta, who has been the initiator and the creator of the Global Innovation Index. Soumitra will now make a presentation of the main results and methodology of the report, together with Daniela Benavente. Daniela is a senior researcher with INSEAD who has worked very, very hard on this report for the now the last 2 years. Just a word about Soumitra, who is the Roland Berger Chair Professor of Technology at INSEAD, but soon becoming the Dean of the Business School of Cornell University in the United States. One of the few non-US deans of major Ivy League business schools. So we are happy for this move by Soumitra. We'll not leave the Global Innovation Index family because it will be a different partnership next year, but still a partnership involving WIPO, INSEAD, and Cornell. So I now give the floor to Soumitra.
Thank you very much, Bruno, for your kind words of introduction, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank you for giving us your time. We all understand how pressed I'm sure you are for different commitments, and the fact that you take this time to attend this launch is a very visible signal of your commitment to innovation. Now, a project such as this would not have been possible without the collaborative efforts of many. The support of WIPO, Alcatel-Lucent, Booz & Co., and GII have been mentioned already, and I thank them once again. I would also like to thank two of my close collaborators, Daniela, on the podium here with me, and Shasha Vush-Vincent from WIPO. I think we have formed a great team, and thank you very much, Shasha. I don't know where you are. Thank you, Shasha, and thank you, Daniela, for your support. Now, innovation is a theme that is certainly very close to our hearts, and I'd like to just preface the presentation by mentioning clearly what are we trying to measure out here. So the Global Innovation Index, at the end of the day, of course, produces a certain number to measure something related to innovation capacity and innovation performance of an economy. But the two elements are very important. We are trying to measure both the innovation capacity, the capability of an economy to innovate, and also the actual innovation performance that exists for an economy. And we fully realize that there might be investments made in innovation capability today that might take some time to show up in actual innovation performance. But this focus on both inputs and outputs is an important part of what we are trying to capture. The second point I'd like to mention at the outset is what is the definition of innovation? Now, when many of us probably went to our graduate programs in universities, the definition was fairly limited for innovation. It was seen often as innovation in new products or new services, and the research being done by a group of scientists or technical specialists inside a research lab of a private enterprise or a governmental organization. And the indicators being used to measure that were classically linked to science and technology indicators typically. The number of scientists, the number of patents, the number of publications, and so on. Now, these indicators still are relevant, still are very important, but what we have seen is innovation has broadened as a theme. Today, innovation is happening in many different spaces, in marketing models, in business models, in pricing models, in even societal models. So we are seeing innovation becoming much more broad as a phenomena, and that brings us the challenge of how do you measure innovations in the broader phenomena. And when you see the innovation index model, we are trying to capture some of this broad-based view of innovation. So please keep that view as you look at this innovation index presentation. I will pass over to Daniela just to outline some specific technical aspects of the presentation of the research we have done, and then I will pick up the presentation and go through some key results.
Good morning. So I'll just provide a short insight on the technical details behind the Global Innovation Index. This index covers 141 countries' economies, which all have their profiles in Appendix 1. We cover 84 indicators, all detailed in Appendix 2, and we have made a huge effort to include as much hard data as possible. So we have a global coverage and a very broad scope. There is an effort to capture innovation in emerging markets through proper scaling of indicators, taking into account the stages in development of countries. We include indicators on knowledge diffusion, the traditional indicators such as knowledge, royalty receipts, high-tech exports, FDI outflows, but also knowledge absorption, high-tech imports, royalty payments, FDI inflows. We detail this time for the very first time this year the strengths and weaknesses of each country in the country profiles. For the very first time as well, we have comparability, year-on-year comparability of results. For the second time, we have an audit of the index that was performed by the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. It's therefore independent, and we provide confidence intervals for the rankings. And we have proper sources and definitions for the 84 indicators that we include, technical notes very clearly defined as well, and details on the adjustments made to the framework and the reasons for the adjustments made to the framework. And you'll see in a second why this is key. For timeliness, first, we have 91% of data which is from 2009 or later. We include new data that we think is relevant these days. For example, from the International Standard Organization, we managed to get data that had never been shared before by Google on video uploads on YouTube for the creative outputs pillar, and so on. One last insight on year-on-year comparability. This year, we are expanding the country coverage by 16 economies, which is a lot, and which has a strong impact on the rankings, particularly for the countries at the bottom of the ranking. So we made an effort to distinguish the impact of those added countries, 16, the impact of the changes in the framework, the new indicators, in those that went out, and so on, and distinguish those impacts from the impact of relative performance on the basis of last year's model. And I say relative because a ranking is always about relative performance. Even if indicators show absolute levels of performance, the rankings always reflect relative performances, and we really made an effort to present the differences in changes in rankings on that basis.
Thank you, Daniela. So what you have in front of you is the framework we use for trying to analyze both the capacity of an economy to innovate and the actual innovation results. So on the left-hand side, you have 5 input pillars that capture the capability of an economy to innovate. Those input pillars are institutions, human capital and research, infrastructure, market sophistication, and business sophistication. Each of them further subdivided into sub-elements, as you can read on the screen. We also have 2 output pillars which capture some of the actual outputs of innovation. There we have the technology and the knowledge outputs, and we have, very important, the creative outputs, which is a new element to the discussion of innovation today globally. As Daniela said, we do try to evolve the framework incrementally every year, and this year we have made 2 important incremental evolutions. The first evolution is in the infrastructure pillar. You will see at the bottom a sub-pillar, a sub-component on ecological sustainability. So we do believe sustainability is an important theme, important element of building a sustainable capability for innovation in an economy. So we have tried to highlight that element in the framework more explicitly. Also, you will see in the last pillar of creative outputs at the bottom, there is a new sub-component on online creativity. So we all know that there's a lot of creativity happening online today in different formats, in different forms by individuals and businesses and other organizations. And we are trying to capture some of this online creativity also in the framework. Now, if you look at the results of this year, a very simple summary of the results are shown on the slide. So you can think of different kinds of rankings. So the first one is a ranking on the input indicators, the input capability. So that is a simple average of the 5 input pillars. The next one is a simple average of the 2 output pillars. So the 2 output dimensions of actual innovation performance. And then as 2 overall measures, we have 2 indicators. One is the efficiency ratio, which is output divided by input, which is a measure of how efficiently is an economy transforming its input capability into innovation outputs. And the overall measure that we quote is the Global Innovation Index, which is a simple average of the input and output sub-indexes. Now you will see that the overall average, which is the last column out here on the screen, or Global Innovation Index, gives an overall holistic score of an economy's capability to innovate and also the actual innovation performance. And there you see a mix of economies, mainly high-income economies, but from across the world, Europe, Asia, and North America. What is more interesting is, of course, the efficiency ratio, where you see perhaps a different set of countries, a mix of both high income countries, and also low income economies or middle income economies. And that represents a different kind of measurement, a capability of how efficiently is a country transforming inputs into outputs at different levels of income. Now, in terms of key results, I'll go through them very quickly. I'd like to encourage you to read through the report in detail. There are lots of very interesting data elements out there. Specifically, also we have detailed country profiles. Now, one overall result we see is in the world today, we see still a strong innovation divide. People talk about digital divides and other divides. We do see an innovation divide in which the high-income economies do tend to dominate along the different elements of the innovation index model. Now, if you look at a geographical basis, you see there is again a clear trend in which Northern America tends to have the overall highest scores on the Global Innovation Index, followed by Europe, followed by Southeast Asia and Oceania, followed by Northern Africa and Western Asia, followed by Latin America and Caribbean, followed by Central Southern Asia, and finally Sub-Saharan Africa. Of course, you can take a different geographical split of these different economies, but it gives you a sense of how this different innovation performance is spread on a geographical basis. Now, the second result is also interesting, is if you plot the various countries and the performance on the index based on the income per capita, GDP per capita, you see an interesting trend line out there. So you see some economies who are performing extremely well. For the same GDP per capita, they're performing at a much higher level. Some that are performing perhaps at higher levels, but at lower GDP per capita levels, and some that are performing below the trend line. Now, if you look at some of these more detailed countries, we have details of where each country is positioned. It might take you some time to find your country of interest in this slide, which is a little crowded. But at the same time, what we do see is a trend that you see across different income groups, countries that are doing better than the trend line, countries that are doing approximately at the same trend line, and countries that are perhaps performing at a slightly lower level below the trend line. So here you see the countries with a red dot at different income levels are performing above the trend line. So for the same GDP per capita levels, they are in fact doing better as compared to other countries at the similar income levels or GDP levels. The countries with the middle set of lightly colored bluish black dots, they are performing close to the trend line. Again, at different income levels, they are performing close to the trend line, what you'd expect at that GDP per capita levels. And countries at the lower, more darker shaded bullet points, they are performing at levels which are in relative terms lower than the trend line. So again, it gives you a sense of where different countries are positioned, and one can of course use this data points as sources for learning, for benchmarking, and trying to see not just how you compare with other comparable or other interesting countries, but also how can you learn from them and improve for the future. Now, another important result is looking at the investments that companies and countries are making in innovation. And here we see some interesting trends. There are countries and economies that have increased the innovation spending in the last few years since the crisis. There are countries that have managed to maintain the innovation spending, and many others have decreased the innovation spending. And what we would like to point out here is that based on our research, we do believe that a continued commitment to investing in innovation is very important. Because if you slow down or stop innovation spending in times of crisis or in times when you're challenged fiscally, it may take you much longer to recover that momentum once the economy improves or once that crisis sort of becomes less accentuated for the economies in question. So it's very important to keep that commitment to innovation going forward from our results. What we also see is, and this was highlighted in the introductory comments, the linkages across innovation actors are very important. Because today we all know that there are multiple actors who influence the innovation culture, the innovation results in an economy. And just focusing on any one actor by themselves or by itself doesn't necessarily enable an economy to make the desired progress. So one has to act and seek the support of multiple actors. One has to build the linkages across them. And that's one reason why today in the report we also have a number of very important chapters that go into some of the qualitative aspects of how to build the linkages. Many of the chapters have been contributed by our knowledge partners, many by our esteemed advisory board members, and from other experts around the world. And sometimes they also focus on regional phenomena, regional expertise that you see in specific parts of the world. So we need to understand some of the linkages much better and try to see how can each economy, for its own stage of development, for its own unique history and culture, build more and stronger linkages across the innovation actors. Another result which is interesting in the context of being in Europe is that you do see a pattern of a multi-speed Europe. Now here you have a in-depth, let's say, blow up of the European countries on the previous graph that you saw. And here you see that some economies, especially in Northern Europe, are doing, in relative terms, better than others in Southern Europe. But what is also interesting is you see some economies in Eastern Europe, like Czech Republic, like Hungary, like Latvia, like Estonia, who are coming up and moving rapidly up the innovation performance. So in some sense, there is a picture that is a complex one in Europe. There are leaders, there are rapid movers and learners, and there are also economies that can perhaps do better. Now, if you look at Northern America, you of course have the US in a very strong position at number 10. But it's also interesting to note that the US used to be slightly higher up in the previous rankings. Now, what we have done this year is try to compare over 10 years the trend lines in some indicators which we consider as being important for America as compared to other leading innovators. Here we represent some of them, and you will see that the US performance in some cases is comparable to other leaders, in some cases better, but in some other cases it actually is a little bit lower. And even more worrying, sometimes the trend lines are perhaps not in the right direction. So it shows that there are some weakness in some of these economies despite great strengths, and there's some attention perhaps that could be focused on some of these weaknesses in order to preserve the strong position that America has in global innovation. Now, if you look at the BRIC economies and you compare them to the top 10 on the Global Innovation Index, you see an interesting pattern. So the solid red line out here represents the top 10 on the Global Innovation Index as a whole. And then you have Brazil, China, India, and Russia represented by various dotted and solid lines of different colors. Now you see that there is a slight interesting pattern developing. You see that China on knowledge and technology outputs comes very close and in fact even exceeds the average of the top 10 innovators. And this is interesting development, showing that even middle-income economies or emerging economies can achieve high results in specific areas of innovation outputs. If you look at further details and you look at these, as we mentioned, there are 7 pillars, 5 input and 2 outputs. Each pillar has 3 sub-components, so there are 21 subcomponents in total. And you take a division of the 7 on which there's the closest, the least variation across the BRIC countries, and the 7 on which you have the highest variation across the BRIC countries. So you see again interesting patterns. And if you look at your picture on the right, where you see the 7 subcomponents on which there's the highest variation amongst the BRIC countries, you see, of course, China doing very well on knowledge creation, 6.1, but you also see India doing very well on creative intangibles, which is 7.1. So you see some interesting trends developing, and of course, you can go further in depth to understand some of these phenomena better. On the whole, what we see is the BRIC countries need to continue the investments in innovation inside various aspects of the economies, and certainly we do believe that there is more work to be done despite the progress they have made so far in further improving the innovation potential, innovation performance. The last result really out here is around this entire exercise as a whole. Measuring innovation, as I said at the start, is not an easy topic today because the definition of innovation has become much broader. So we do believe that the Global Innovation Index is an important step in the direction. We do expect that the model will keep evolving as our knowledge improves, as the data collection in areas of innovation measurement improve. And we do hope that you will join us in this journey. Your feedback, your application of some of these ideas to your own context is very important. And we do see this as a continuous process in which all of us learn together about how to best measure innovation performance, how to better measure innovation capabilities, because ultimately we need data to make more evidence-based policies. And ultimate goal of exercise like this is to help policymakers make better decisions in their own national context. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Soumitra and Daniela. I invite now the panelists to join us on the podium. So we have now reshuffled the podium to start the high-level policy panel, which will be the last segment of the launch today. And I will introduce the panel in a second. Just to establish a transition between the presentation of the report that we just heard from Soumitra, Dutta, and Daniela Benavente. The key messages are pretty clear and point not only at the complexity of the landscape, but also the lessons we can draw from the experiences of the many countries included in the report this year. And some of those lessons have to do with the importance of a continuous approach, that having a stop-and-go policy about innovation investment doesn't work. And that if we have learned anything from the success of the champions of the GII, it is that they have been indeed investing in innovation for a number of years and decades, and sometimes more. And this is something that can be implemented in different ways, at different levels of development, and in different parts of the world. Innovation is clearly the combination of three elements, as we've heard. First, you need minds, you need ideas, you need creative people. Second, you need a market. You need an environment where there is demand for the kind of innovation that can be generated out of these innovative minds. And third, you need support, which can be, has to be financial support. The presence of venture capitalists, for instance, is important, public financing, but also proper institutions. And all of that works only if linkages exist between the three. If universities, businesses, and governments work together around what can be considered as a common mindset for innovation. The purpose of this high-level policy panel is to take a step away from the report and try to identify what is strategic about it. What are the main axes by which we can move away from what could be otherwise a purely academic exercise to what have we learned from the experience described in the report, what has been done already on the ground, and what could be the major strategic axis for improvement of innovation performance around the world. To address these questions, we have a quite remarkable panel today. And let me just mention for the time being the names and titles of the people on this podium before I give them the possibility to express their initial pitch, as we say, very rapidly, and moving then to the discussion. Of course, I don't need to introduce Francis Gurry, the Director General of WIPO, because you've seen him and heard him before, and we are in his house. So thank you for welcoming us here, Francis. And starting from the very right of our panelists, we have Mr. Mohammed Al-Suwaiyel, President of King Abdulaziz City of Science and Technology, KACST, in Saudi Arabia. Next to Mohammed, we have Dr. Jeong Kim, the president of Bell Labs, part of Alcatel-Lucent, coming from the USA. On my immediate left, we have Mr. Sibusiso Sibisi, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, member of the National Advisory Council on Innovation in South Africa. And last but not least, on my very left, Mr. Werner Bauer, who is the Executive Vice President of the Executive Board and Chief Technology Officer of Nestle SA in Switzerland. So welcome to you all. Let me turn to, we have decided in our preparatory meetings to operate on a first name basis, and even a shorter than first name basis for my neighbor on the left. So Zbu, please tell us, and this is the question I'm addressing to all four panelists as an initial pitch, what is your passion about innovation? If you are not in your current position, why would you still be interested in innovation?
Thank you. Is this on? Yeah, two things. One is innovation to drive economic growth, but closely coupled to that is innovation to drive social transformation explicitly. And being from South Africa, this is something I feel very passionate, very strongly about. And what I mean by social transformation here is poverty reduction, job creation. South Africa has a, depending on how you measure it, 25% level of unemployment. It could be even greater, depending on exactly how you define unemployment. Now, it is absolutely essential, therefore, that innovation indeed must lead to economic growth through the creation of industry, through the development of services and goods. But it is also critical that it must enable greater inclusion, greater inclusivity, greater ability for people to be involved in the economy, to enable them to create their own enterprises, and therefore there's a whole area of associated set of activities of associated support necessary in order for people to participate in the economic growth that might arise through innovation. So in a nutshell, I'd say the key expression for me is inclusive growth. Inclusive growth through innovation, and that is key, particularly in the South African context, to both social stability and to social cohesion.
Thank you, Booz. Already a vibrant plea to use innovation not as an end in itself, but as a social transformer and a tool to reduce inequalities and stimulate job creation and growth. Werner, what is your passion about innovation?
After 40 years being in the job, not to be passionate. Half of that I spent at universities, teaching and being professor, the other half in the industry. And the real passion behind are two things. It's the people and it's the outcome of innovation, which gives solutions. So it's not the gimmick innovation, it's the real solution to consumers, whether this is in healthcare, whether this is in being more confident with what you get, new services and so on. The passion behind it, when it's applied by billions of people, that's really sacrificing your passion, let's call it that way, and gratifying at the end.
Thank you. So see it happen and changing the lives of people, the real people living real lives. I'm also interested in the word solution. I've heard recently that French is one of the better languages to address gender issues because it's one of the languages where the problem is masculine and the solution is feminine. Let me turn to Mohammed, your passion.
Well, thank you. In 2 minutes, I'll talk about two issues which I think will drive the innovation in the next 2 decades. One, we have changing demographics of the world. We have a lot of young people in the developing countries and aging populations in the developed countries. Young people are known for their radical innovations, while aging people are known for their innovations based on accumulated knowledge. So I expect that the developing world, with a lot of young generation it has, will contribute to the new radical innovations. The second driver, I believe there is a lot of talk about sustainability, environmental and energy. And I see sustainability as an issue that will be forming a drive of a new wave of innovations with a lot of economic impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. So give attention to younger generation. Clearly, when you have in majority of emerging countries, a demographic median point around 18 years of age, it matters. And another future-looking trend, which is sustainability. And as we've heard from Soumitra's presentation, we have indeed a new set of variables in the index this year. So when one thinks about innovation, looking up at what has been one of the most successful success stories of innovation, one thinks of Bell Lab. So, Jeong, what is your passion in that context?
Getting the timing right. You know, most of us think about the innovation in 2 dimensions. First dimension is a creation process, about introducing something new and novel in terms of product or process. And second dimension is the market impact. you can be a leader in terms of technical innovations, and yet if you cannot implement because market is not quite ready, then it's the fast follower who reaps the benefit of your technical innovations. And unfortunately, in our company, we have a history of experiencing that. So my thinking is really getting the timing right. Innovation, as I think about it, is a collaborative process. It is a team sport. And in terms of research, collaboration happens with academia and researchers in government labs and so on. But the one thing the industrial lab offers, in contrast to government or academia, is the access to the market. And by having rapid feedback from the market and having a continuous conversation with the market will allow us to get the timing right. Of course, we have to match that with business capability that company can deliver. So that's what keeps me awake at night.
Thank you very much, Jeong. So keeping in mind that indeed we have to look not just at bright ideas, but something that can generate growth, create jobs, feed competitiveness, and this idea that innovation is a collaborative process. I think it's probably something we're going to come back to in the discussion. Let me turn back to Sbu. You mentioned and in line with what we just heard from Jeong, collaborative process. We hear a lot about diversity. There was a recent study by a New York-based foundation showing that immigration in the US had been key to generating patents, creativity in a number of contexts. If we look at South African society, you have, if I'm not mistaken, something like 11 official languages. Is that an advantage to have this kind of cultural diversity, or is it a handicap for innovation?
Both. At one level, clearly it is important for people to be able to speak a common language, as it were, and naturally in the practical world that we live in, most people will aspire to speak the universal language of business, that is English. However, in order to be able to communicate with a variety of people, there are large numbers of people, large levels of poor education, which is a matter that we'll come to as well, who will communicate naturally in one of the home languages. I dare say, even though there are 11 languages, in fact, in practice, many are related. So there are roughly about 4 major groups of languages. So the challenge, therefore, becomes from a perspective of innovation. How do you set about, for example, doing work on speech recognition that allows people to interrogate, say, websites in their language, both by way of translation of what is returned, information that is returned, and by way of people being able to query through the use of the home languages. You find that in the usage of information technology or the provision of services, for example, by hospitals, by insurance companies and so on, increasingly there's a huge opportunity. And that opportunity is not only restricted to people who can speak the languages of South Africa, but people who have understanding of the structure of languages in general, to be able to make a contribution to allowing people who may not be English speakers to be part of this interesting journey that we're talking about here.
Okay, so what may appear as a difficulty actually can be turned into an advantage as well. So we heard, I think, Sbu, you deserve to be an economist, because the economists need both hands, because they always say on one hand, on the other hand. So we've heard that indeed it can be an advantage and a disadvantage. Werner, okay, so Switzerland is the champion this year, so congratulations. We look at the top, and we see that there is 3 countries at the top: Switzerland, Sweden, Singapore. And apart from having names that start with an S, as by the way we have Saudi Arabia and South Africa on the podium, but it's no intention from our side. They happen to be small countries. Typically they have between 5 and 10 million inhabitants. One has a tendency to consider that innovation is easier to start when you have a larger home market, because you can make more trials, you can rely on a bigger domestic market. What we see in this year's GII rankings is that counterintuitive, or how important is Switzerland, for instance, in Nestle's approach to innovation?
Yeah. Switzerland is in our total turnover about 2%. In the number of people that are working here, it's 3% out of our 330,000. Then 8% of our investments go here, and that might be surprising, but this is where we put our high-tech factories for infant formula, Nespresso, or things like that. And 60% almost for our R&D investments. And this has been constant over the past years. The reasons are, if you give me a few seconds, I would perhaps explain why this Swiss link over the years. It has to do, an R&D environment needs the right people with the right infrastructure behind it. And that means well-educated people. Switzerland has an outstanding education system which goes all the way from basic education to universities. It has a high capability of integration. 23% of the workforce here are foreigners. No, workforce even more, 23% of the population. And we depend in R&D heavily that those foreigners can come from wherever in the world to work in our R&D centers. The work ethics, I don't even want to mention that one, but those who have seen the elections just a few weeks ago where the people voted against increase of holidays, show me any other world country where the population would vote against that one. And it's not for a joke, it's really worth ethics in the sense of annual working hours are by far ahead of any other country in the world. So, and this in R&D is very, very important, just to tell the least. So it's not a question of salaries, it's a question of efficiencies. Then you have a very high level of loyalty of people, so you can go into the depth of things. In our company, the average residence time of somebody until he leaves the company is about 28 years. Huh? That's the average. So with this loyalty, you can build up a lot of know-how, knowledge. Knowledge management is via people, not via papers. So that's very clear. You have a safe legal frame, 4 patents for everything, so that helps as well. A quite stubborn population here, persistence in the sense of when they start something, they finish it. And yeah, discipline works as well here. 98% of the trains are in time. Huh? That's better than Germany, by far. So this, just from an attitudinal point of view, that's why I defend that investment in Switzerland as an R&D stand. The other one is clearly you have here as well as because of the size, the small size of a country. It's similar like in Singapore and so on. When a country is small, they have to build clusters of excellence. And around these clusters of excellence, you can settle in with your company just around it. And that helps a lot, especially with startups, venture capital, and so on. Excuse me for being too long.
Yeah, I would like actually to piggyback because of course, we have to look at number one and try to see whether there are lessons that can be applied and what all of us can do better next year and beat you to it. So basically, you have a company where people stay an average of 28 years, yes, not wanting to take the vacation, arriving on time because their trains arrive on time. Okay, so we see that happening. Yet, one of the things which is a concern of many companies we've worked with for this report and in other circumstances who are very active in the area of innovation is the global mobility of talent. Which many people see as an opportunity, saying we can attract talents, we can attract people who will help us become more innovative. And at the same time, they are very worried by that because they see innovation as a leaky process. You invest in people, you train them, you teach them, and they may leave you and go to the competitors. How do you see that? Is that a concern within your company, or do you have a secret ingredient to fight it?
It's definitely counterbalanced by our big R&D centers in China, India, US and so on, so that we have a constant flux. So the stability is not local stability, it's a stability in the company. That means that 28 years can be people who have worked 10 years in China, 10 years in Germany or something. That's the average. Okay. And it's accompanied by a strong education and development planning process.
Getting people interested, giving them opportunities to grow and develop within the companies, and thinking of sustainability and stability at the global level and not in a limited local environment are clearly worth considering. Looking at a big country like Saudi Arabia, what are the challenges you see in that area? What are the guidelines? You mentioned earlier, Mohammed, the main trends, the sustainable environment. Now, Saudi Arabia has had one major challenge over the last few decades, which is to diversify away from an oil-based economy into a more varied type of economy. Information technology, telecommunications, has been spearheading the way in many more than one way successfully. What is the take within Saudi Arabia, which is a different context from Switzerland, about stimulating innovation?
A country like Saudi Arabia, whose economy is based on a single resource, has no alternative but to diversify. And the approach to diversify has been taken systematically. A few years ago, the country designed a national science, technology, and innovation plan. His Excellency Dr. Attar was the Minister of Planning at the time, and he was a major driver for this initiative. Now the plan is in its 6th year, and I would try to summarize the development we'll be doing in 3 stages. One, to be in knowledge acquisition. And in knowledge acquisition, education system is extremely important. Our education system is not as good as mentioned in Switzerland, but we're trying to improve it. However, the Arabic content on the internet is a very important source of knowledge acquisition. And 3 years ago, the Arabic knowledge on the internet was very miserable, less than half a percentage point. It should be about 5% in proportion to the Arab-speaking population in the world. So part of this plan, we took an initiative to enhance the Arabic content of the internet by developing open source tools accessible to all the Arab world from Morocco to Iraq. And I'm very happy to say that 3 years later, according to Google's estimate, the Arabic content on the internet jumped 8 times. Now it's about 2.4%. We still have halfway to go, but this is a good achievement. And the second thing, acquisition and then dissemination of knowledge, we need the internet. And recently, also part of this national plan, there has been a major initiative for broadband that gets the support from the highest authority in the country. And along these lines, I think we, let's say, cover knowledge acquisition and dissemination. However, we need to move to knowledge usage and generation. Part of the science technology plan, we have a single resource, which is oil, and it's not infinite. But we also have an extremely important source of energy, which is infinite, more or less, which is the sun. Of course, we did not innovate the sun, but we have to innovate ways of using the sun. And a priority research area for the country, and I'm sure for many countries in the world, is water. However, we have a lot of seas and we have sun, so we combine the two, and we worked with major international partners. IBM is one of them, and recently we are in a position to build whole water desalination stations in the country using local technology, using the solar energy. And currently, the country desalinates about 1/5 of the water in the world, 18%. So we have to develop our own technology for desalination. A major project we started, my organization was the main contributor to this, And in about 9 months from now, I hope we can invite some of you to the opening of the first major water desalination station in the world using solar energy. We already are talking of this will be on the east coast of the country. We're building on the west coast of the country a few major water desalination stations using solar energy, but the most important, using locally developed technology. That starts from the sand to silicon wafers to solar panels and then other technologies like membranes, etc. I believe this is not a theoretical, but we already have achieved. The internet penetration is very high. The Arabic content of the internet has increased. We developed our own technologies for the most critical resource, which is water. The last thing I would like to say is that the ICT in the country has witnessed a major improvement. Now penetration of telephones is very high, like 200% or 188. Penetration of the internet is high. I don't recall the number, but the broadband initiative is coming. Finally, I read statistics a few weeks ago that was surprising to me in a nice way, that Saudi Arabia is considered the number 5 software developer for these devices, and especially for the Arabic software. So here we have a good potential to diversify, but unless we do it, we have no choice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, for this very precious insight into what has been happening and what is happening right now in Saudi Arabia. Clearly, this combination of water, sun, desalinization is something which the world will be watching very, very closely because the stakes are high. I'm also struck by the 2 points you mentioned about Arabic content. Okay, which goes back to the point we were discussing with Boo earlier about diversity, languages, etc. As you know, one of our knowledge partners is the Internet Society, and we have Marcus Kummer with us today. This is clearly something on which the Internet community has been working very hard. GTLD names, using different languages. So clearly something is happening, and the important is to hear from people like you coming from the ground that there is demand for that. If you do it, something is going to happen. The second, and it's a key instrument for innovation, clearly. The other one, which echoes what we heard from Hamadoun Toure earlier about broadband, that indeed developing broadband capacity is also key to developing abilities in the area of innovation, especially collaborative innovation. There is one chapter in this report this year that, and one of the co-author is Robert Shaw in this room from ITU. And this article, this chapter insists very much on the fact that because of broadband, the critical path to innovation may be modified radically. So there are clearly a number of qualitative dimensions of broadband on innovation that needs to be taken into account. Let me now turn to Jeong, because we heard, everything I heard relates one way or another in the way that Bell Lab has been actually handling its own policy, strategies, etc. We've heard about what is happening at the level of a company, like Nestle was happening at the level of a government. In your experience, and given your weight as a group and the pioneering work that's been done by Bell Lab in all these areas, from transistor to everything we can think of, are there policies that work? What type of policies are critical to decide whether an innovation strategy will succeed or fail?
Actually, it's easier to point out the policies that doesn't work. We collaborate with, over the years, about 200 different universities around the world, and one of the a stumbling block we run into always is a lack of alignment of interest. Professors get promoted by publishing number of papers, not necessarily collaborating with others. Of course, if collaboration results in papers, maybe that's one. I mean, that's the justification why we collaborate. But collaboration in terms of creating a new process and so on that actually resulted in economic impact for the company, that doesn't necessarily translate into a something that is good for the professors. So university policies that promoting professors for collaboration with industrial research is not really there. And I mentioned earlier in my remark why we need to collaborate with industrial research because of market timing. But also the industrial research setting, the solutions to the real world problem requires a cross-discipline engineering because because that's the way it is. It's complex problems requires complex way of solving the problems, and academia is simply not organized in that way. It is organized in highly specialized disciplines. So industrial research needs to work as a interface with those market. Excuse me. Second part is that how do you treat intellectual property, and I hear often way to treat intellectual property is risk sharing and risk reward sharing, meaning that if you jointly create intellectual property in forms of, let's say, patents, and then when you monetize those patents, then to proceed from monetization of that should be shared with the a company and a university or the creator. Well, in reality, it doesn't work because big company like ours, it is common practice for us to cross-license with the other companies so that we don't have to worry about the companies suing each other the entire time. And how do you account for individual patents in the 29,000 patents, for instance, we have in Bell Labs that we cross-license with our competitors and other companies? There's no way to track it. So if you insist that you do that, and sometimes government insisted that kind of mandate as a form of a funding, it's just not implementable. Therefore, it discourages collaborations. And so I think it is really important that we treat the intellectual property in a very practical terms, and way to do it. We've learned it is if intellectual property is developed jointly, then each co-own it without any restriction, so that we, as a big company, we can use it any way we want it. If it's just academia, they can start the new companies based on that without any restrictions as well. And if you're a venture capitalist, want to support the startup companies based on some of these things, you don't want to have a big company claiming part of ownership anyway. So it works better. But on the surface, it may be difficult for you to accept. But this kind of changes, government and the university needs to understand it and then actually modify it.
Thank you very much. So very important point, and probably further food for thought about when we say collaboration, do we really mean it? That is this idea that you're not going to track all of your 29,000 patents. You're going to stimulate, on the contrary, cross-licensing, work together, and then say, basically, we worked at this together, we share it. And whoever wants to use it can use it to the maximum extent. It's clearly not the environment which is yet the default environment. It's not the world in which we live, but there might be ways in which we can get closer to that. I don't know if from Nestle's side, is that an environment in which you would feel totally comfortable?
No. On the intellectual protection, we normally look at, before we put an R&D center into a country, we look at the whole protection possibilities behind it. So we are not blind in that sense. I personally had the feeling that the situation has very much improved in the past few years around that. Really improved. There are a few food traps out there, like when it comes to biopiracy or other things, that we just have to find the common and good way of working together then between the governments and research environment and so on. We have examples on that, but generally I had not the feeling it's worsening.
Thank you. We are reaching the end of this discussion. And with not exhausting any of the facets we have mentioned clearly, and keeping in mind the rule of the game, which is that the DG has the total freedom to intervene any kind he wishes to. I would like to turn to the four panelists to say, okay, we have rather large number of people in this room. In about 10-15 minutes from now, they're going to pass those doors and leave. If you wanted them to remember something from this quick discussion we had right now, in 5-6 words, a sentence, like to engrave and say, oh, I remember, as Booz said that during that panel, or Werner said that, what would it be? Quite a challenge. So let me turn to you, Booz, first.
Wow. That is indeed a challenge. The theme that's written up there on the banner is innovation linkages for global growth. I think what I'd want to see is an addition to that says innovation linkages for global growth and global public good explicitly. Because there's a great number of things that we can do together where we need not necessarily be constrained by considerations for strong patent regimes and so on, because we're working in areas such as energy and water and so on, where we all have a common interest and can benefit enormously from joint collaboration.
Joint collaboration. Bruno.
I would say, for me, really as an experience over so many years, in innovation, people are 1,000 times more valuable than systems or money.
Thank you.
Innovation is definitely essential for the developed and the developing worlds equally to achieve their potential. However, the ways and tools to nurture innovation, promote it, and make use of it are different. In the developed world, we have a set of tools. In the developing world, I would like us to remember that we need the different set of tools. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jeong.
Going last is dangerous because somebody already said something that you wanted to say. Yeah, I was going to say that when it comes to disruptive innovation, quality matters more than quantity in terms of people. Now, let me say something else. When we often talked about research and development in one sentence. The whole idea of innovation is to get the economic benefit. In that context, I want to say research is global and development can be local. Because global, you have to collaborate with the best minds around the world, but in order to reap the benefit, you have to bring that idea to the real world, which is a development effort, can be tailored to local regions for your country and whatnot. So,
thank you very much. Francis, do you want to add anything before I try to summarize this?
No, just let me say, perhaps if you're looking for something, I would say innovation is too important as an economic and social phenomenon to be over-politicized.
Thank you. That adds to the complexity of my summary, but I will leave it aside for the time being. I think what we've heard from our four panelists has lots of facets. I think we heard it from the ground, that is from what it means operating a large company, from coming from an emerging country. And that indeed was the step away from the report, starting from the real ground reality, and making sure, as Jeong suggested, that we are not in the world of an academic report and academic research, but we try to actually have an influence somehow on the real life of real people. And what all of our panelists have mentioned in more than one way is first that innovation is a state of mind. It's a mindset. You have to have a mindset of innovation in your company, in your country, in your environment, if you want something to happen. And this ecosystem is actually built around this mindset. A second point, which was also mentioned by Jeong, is that when we try to identify what the good policies are, it's easier to identify those that don't work. And I remember trying sometime in my earlier days at the World Bank to say, in addition to listing the best practices, maybe one day we should start listing the worst practices. And then somebody says, oh yeah, that's interesting. And when you hear that in the World Bank, it means forget about it. So clearly there are obstacles about it. We are not there yet. We are not going to ask WIPO to give us a ranking of the worst practices in the area of innovation. This is not going to happen, but it's clearly something to keep in mind, that we have now a range of things that have worked, have not worked, and at least let's not repeat the errors of the past. What all of our panelists insisted on is that it's not just a matter of throwing money at innovation. It's not just a question of quantity, it's a question of quality in the people. But the qualitative aspect of innovation means that getting the cultural aspect into it, seeing what are your strengths, what are your specificities as a country, as a culture, what is your language, how can you push, as Mohammed said, more Arabic content on the internet, are critical elements to stimulate a culture of innovation locally. As we heard also, diversity, collaboration, openness are part of this mindset. Think globally when you try to get the best ideas. Turn them into something that can lead to success, to job creation, to growth. This global approach, trying to pick the best from the best strains around, diversifying your research and development activities around the world, as we heard from Werner, looking at different ways of doing things is clearly important. And what we heard before, when Soumitra was describing the main results, seeing how China in some areas is now higher than the average of the 10 most performing countries, shows that it is feasible. So there's clearly a message of optimism there, something that can be done. But the lesson I draw from the discussion, which for me is the strongest, and this is where Booz started from and what has been repeated by every single one of our 4 panelists, is, guys, this is not about technology, this is about people. In the end, the innovators are going to be people. They're going to be the men, the women, the young people who will teach us to think differently, to see the world differently, and to create a better world. So if it were for that message only, I'd like to thank our panelists and ask you to join me in a round of applause.